Hello, I'm Erik Griswold. I'm a composer and pianist, and I'm speaking to you from my very crowded studio in the south side of Brisbane on Yagara and Turrbal land. So today I'd like to talk to you about my work for prepared piano. What is a prepared piano? Well, a prepared piano is one that's been altered by placing materials, bits and pieces in between the strings, which has the effect of transforming the sound and turning the piano into a kind of miniature percussion orchestra. The person who's most closely associated with prepared piano is the composer John Cage, who's someone who influenced me quite a lot. I was actually lucky enough to meet him a couple of times before he died. This was in Southern California. So he, in fact, developed, according to legend, developed the prepared piano because he couldn't fit a percussion ensemble on the stage of a concert that he had planned, a dance performance. And but they had a grand piano in this theater. So he came up with the idea of imitating the sounds of the percussion on the piano. And he experimented with different things. He tried putting an ashtray on the strings. He tried putting erasers in between the strings. Just whatever he had on hand to try to create those sort of percussive effects that he was going for. Now, John Cage is definitely a pioneer of prepared piano, but there are some other people who were experimenting with similar ideas in the early part of the 20th century. One person who was really influential on Cage was the composer Henry Cowell, and he experimented with what I would call extended piano techniques, which means more playing on the inside of the piano. So he wrote fantastic pieces where you strum and scrape and stroke the strings to create all kinds of really interesting sounds. Another composer who is one of my favorites, who also, according to legend, used the prepared piano, was Erik Satie. And Satie apparently, in one famous performance, put a piece of paper over the strings to create a kind of a noisy rattle effect. So that is like some of the history of prepared piano from the point of view of experimental composers. But there's another interesting side of it, to which there's not a lot of scholarship about this, but there are various references to the tradition of African American pianists using preparations to also in a similar way to imitate the sound of percussion. So we can imagine the boogie-woogie pianists using materials like paper or leather on the bass strings of the piano to produce those choo-choo train effects and to imitate the sound of drum kit. So they became a drum kit and piano all in one. That's a side of the history that I find really fascinating, and it's something that I've always been interested in my work in exploring both of those aspects of it. So the composed side of things and the improvised side of things. So I'm speaking to you. I'm sitting at my 1885 Lip & Sons piano. And I was very lucky to be gifted this piano many years ago by my good friend Stephen Whittington. And he had, I suppose, outgrown this piano, which he had for some years as his student instrument. This piano is fantastic for prepared piano because of the layout of the strings. so on this piano you can reach almost all of the strings all the way across, so I can actually access almost every string. There are just a few here that cross under, which are difficult to reach. Now, every piano is different. I mean, the Lip and Son they're beautiful instruments, but not necessarily the most common piano you would find in a concert hall. As I say, every piano is different, so Steinway has their own design of the internals of the piano. Each model of Steinway has its own design. Similarly with Kawai, Yamaha, all of the major makers. So when you're using the techniques of prepared piano, you have to take into account all the different idiosyncrasies of the pianos. So that's something that has also been important to me in terms of developing my approach to the piano. So this is my toolkit. This is what I use to prepare the piano, and in here you can see I've got brass bolts in a few different sizes. I have strips of rubber elastic, which this is the sort of thing you would use in the waistband of swimmers. I have some steel bolts that are also in different sizes. Here I have screws, and I have actually put some tape around the screws in this case. I have got strips of paper and little bits of cardboard. So those are the main materials I'm going to be using in this preparation. And then importantly, my tools for putting the preparations in, a screwdriver and some really sharp tweezers. Or I should say really fine, they don't have to be sharp. Okay, so this is my sort of fishing box of preparations. Now, the other thing that I'm going to be using to prepare the piano today is this sheet music, which shows me the instructions for preparing the piano for my piece, Yokohama Flowers. So each time I play Yokohama Flowers, I'll prepare it, trying to get exactly the same as this instruction sheet. Of course, every piano is different, so I might have to adjust things a little bit. Now, generally speaking, each new piece I do has its own set of preparations. It has its own sound. So I would usually have a different set of instructions for each piece that I do. In this particular case, Yokohama Flowers actually uses the same preparations as another piece, which is A Wolf in the Mangroves, for those trivia nuts out there. Okay, so here I go. What I would like to do is now show you the sound of the different materials, and I'm going to do that by preparing the piano one layer at a time. So the first layer I'm going to put in the piano is paper strips. So these little bits of paper I'm actually weaving under the middle string. So each of these notes in the treble have 3 strings. And so I weave the paper over the first string, under the second string, over the third string. Okay, that is the paper layer. So the sound that I'm trying to get here is I'm trying to get a noisy buzz on each one of the notes. So now I might just have a listen to those and adjust them if I need to. So those all seem to be working pretty well. And I'm going to move on to the next layer, which is going to be the rubber. So the rubber, I'm using basically the same technique. And what I'm doing is lacing the rubber under the strings in the same way I did with the paper. Now, some people use blue tack to achieve a similar effect. But I like the sound of the elastic. Okay, there you have the rubber layer. So this material, what I'm going for is it dampens the harmonics of the string, so it kind of takes away some of those higher frequencies and creates a more of a muted tone. But also, what I like about this rubber is that when I hit the string, there's a bit of play in the rubber. The rubber gives a bit of a bounce, and so that creates an extra percussive attack, which to me sounds a little bit like a marimba or even like a plucked guitar. So that's the rubber. Okay, now moving into some screws and bolts here. So the screws literally get screwed in between the strings. Now I'm switching to some brass bolts. The method I'm using here is that I use the screwdriver to just very gently push the strings apart and create a gap. And that allows me to put the screw in between the strings. The reason why I have all these different sizes of screws is that, first of all, you want the screw to fit nicely in between the strings, so you don't want to put any unnecessary extra tension on the strings. Okay, and the second reason, which has just come up actually for me, so the second reason is that what happens with this, when you insert the screw, it lowers the pitch of the note. Now, a longer screw lowers the pitch more than a smaller screw. So in this case, I'm actually looking for a lower pitch. So I'm going to use a longer screw here. There we go. That's the sound I'm looking for. Okay, so now I've completed this layer. So first, let me just show you the sound of these screws and bolts. So you might have noticed when I was doing that, here I've only put one bolt per note on the keyboard. So I've left one string unprepared. So for each note that I'm playing, you're hearing the original higher pitch, and then you're also hearing the prepared lower pitch. So we get two notes for one there. Now those ones are tuned in octave. But here, this one's not. That one's tuned in ninth, octave, 10th. So by sliding these screws slowly along the string, I can change that under pitch. Okay, now moving on to I'm using screws and bolts, but this time instead of preparing just one, instead of leaving one string unprepared, I'm going to prepare the whole note. Okay, so this I would call the double bolt layer. Here's the whole thing. So normally I put them in like this, and then I just do a bit of a fine tuning. The double screw layer. Okay, two more to go. So the next material I'm going to use is cardboard. So this is obviously a soft material, and it's not as predictable as the steel and brass bolts, so it's a bit of a trial and error process. Okay, that is the cardboard layer. Now, I'm not sure I got all those tunings right, but let's have a listen. So really interesting sound. It's also changes the pitch, so has that in common with the screw preparations, but it has a kind of a much more woody, interesting hollow sound to it. Okay, now finally, the last layer. Again, I'm going back to a kind of a rubber material. And this is a little bit different to what I've been doing. So what I'm trying to achieve here is I'm trying to get the harmonics of the strings to sound. So I'm going down here in the bass register. Now, as you can hear, when I move my finger and I just touch lightly along the string, I can produce the different harmonics of the string. So this next preparation, the way that it works is I'm going to try to find that middle point of the string that has a nice loud harmonic, and I'm going to place my strip of rubber right on that point. Okay, there we go. There you have it, and we have the bass harmonics. That is the preparation for Yokohama Flowers. you.